Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of the PCOS Revolution podcast. I'm so excited today because we have one of my good friends, Deborah Beaumont, who is an advanced practice registered nurse in Kona, Hawaii, and she's also a 2-time cancer survivor. So after her last experience with cancer, which happened to be bilateral breast cancer and multiple complications from treatments, she was very frustrated with conventional medicine and really, got fed up to the point where she was not satisfied with just taking prescriptions, getting the yearly checkups and hoping for the best and hoping things didn't return. So feeling that there was a need to know more about prevention and making treatment decisions that support having a good quality of life was really what drove her to seek holistic and integrative treatment that complemented the medical advice she was given. So she's now a certified functional medicine practitioner and holistic and integrative health coach, supporting women and empowering them to make treatment decisions, not only in treating cancer, but reclaiming their health and just having an overall awesome quality of life after chemo and after the treatment is done. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome you. Thank you, Deborah, for joining us tonight.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you tonight. Although I think it's later for you than for me. I'm in Hawaii. I'm 5 hours behind you.
Yeah, Miami to Hawaii. So I know that this is our PCOS podcast. So you wonder, why are we talking about cancer? But tell us a little bit about how you think hormones can really relate to this and why this is a good time to talk about this right now.
Well, I'm so glad you asked, because I think one of the biggest things I learned going into functional medicine is realizing that hormones affect everything. Hormones affect all aspects of our health, and hormones are at play in most chronic diseases. And I know your specialty is PCOS. My specialty is cancer. But to tell you the truth, there's no way to talk about any of these diseases without talking about the other diseases that are related to hormones. And by definition, that means related to nutrition. There's a very high correlation between having cancer and diabetes. As a matter of fact, 3 of the top degenerative diseases that people experience are cancer, diabetes, and arthritis. And they've actually proven that if you have one, you're statistically at a greater risk for having one, if not both of the other ones. And that's because they're all chronic degenerative diseases that are intricately linked to our lifestyle, our nutrition, and, what we're eating and how we're eating and the choices that we're making. And I think the very same thing can be said for the women that you work with and for the couples you work with in terms of infertility. It's often hormonally driven, but it really comes back to the same factors of stress, nutrition, and lifestyle choices. And that seems to be the foundation of most of the illnesses and health issues that we're all dealing with.
Yeah, and that's so important because we are getting into the holidays, like pretty much smack in the middle of looking at into December. And I really think that we look around and we see all the weight loss information out there. But when we were talking the other day, you mentioned the emotional connection to weight loss, and I just don't think that that's really addressed as much. So I know with your clients, you have them write a food journal, and you say that that's really one of the hardest things is writing the last 3 days of what you've been eating. And why is that so important, and why do you think that's so difficult for women?
Well, I think it's a number of reasons. I would like to backtrack a little bit and talk about the fact that I am someone who has dealt with weight and being overweight much of my life. I actually went from being very anorexic as a child to being very overweight. I have tried every diet there is. I've actually tried surgery and gastric surgery. And so this whole issue of how intricately our emotions are tied with our food and tied with dieting is something that's really near and dear to my heart. And once again, it's one of the major factors that plays a role in cancer, diabetes, PCOS, any of these illnesses. It still comes back to food. And what I find is, and what I feel very strongly, is that most of us have a very distorted relationship with food. I can't really speak for men as much, but I can tell you that almost every woman that I've ever known has been on a life has had a life of serial dieting, really struggling around food, body image. It's so intricately tied to a woman's experience that I think by the time you get to adulthood, most women have tried every diet they can think of, and they're on a roller coaster. And the problem is that many times those diets are not based in anything that has to do with your health. You may feel like it's healthy because you might lose weight, but might be missing the boat in terms of nutrition, nutrient value, even accepting maybe a little bit more weight than you think you should in your head based on eating a healthy diet. I just think that women have been so conditioned around food and dieting and body image that they really are disconnected from how food is affecting them and how it's making them feel. And I think sometimes it takes getting sick. I think it takes getting one of these illnesses where you have to really stop and look at it. You can't just keep doing the same thing. And all of a sudden you really have to look at nutrition and food and really look at it as medicine and what it's doing to your body and what it's doing in terms of hormones and inflammation and, gut problems and a lot of other things. And I think sometimes it's easy to just kind of glide by that until you struggle with a more serious health problem.
So a good question to ask yourself sometimes is, am I hungry, first of all? And then why do I feel like I need this particular food if it's not good for me?
Well, I think that's really the basis of emotional eating well, real quickly, I'll tell you, when I was in my 20s, in one of my cycles of, I had gone from being significantly overweight to actually, at that point in time, I was underweight. And I found a program called Thin Within, and I went to a workshop. And a lot of the women in the room, they were really angry at me because I didn't look like I had any weight problem, which is actually comedic. But I was starving myself. I was maintaining my weight by eating one dry salad and a Snickers bar every day and drinking lots of coffee and Diet Coke. That was my diet, but I was maintaining a number that I liked on the scale. And Thin Within taught me some things that I keep in mind now. And one of the premises of this program was that you could eat whatever you wanted, hence my Snickers bar. But there were a few rules that were outside what you would consider. The first rule was you had to be physically hungry. On a scale of 0 to 10, pretty much you had to be a 1 or a 2. Now that sounds pretty easy, but getting in touch with your body and tuning in and figuring out, am I really hungry or do I just want food, is a really challenging thing for women who have never been in touch with their bodies. The second rule was that you could eat whatever you wanted, but you had to stop when you were no longer hungry. So think about that. Not when you were full, not when you finished, none of those rules. You had to stop when you were no longer hungry. So that meant you had to be paying attention every bite you took and ask yourself the question, am I full or am I no longer hungry? And sometimes, for me, I remember one day I worked nights, which is also another stressful lifestyle factor that didn't help me in terms of battling cancer. But it was like 6 a.m. I had worked all night. It was the end of my day and I wanted a patty melt. And I had waited all night for the cafeteria to open to go get my patty melt, which I did. So by that time I hadn't eaten all night. So I could really confidently say that, yes, I was like a 1 on my 0 to 10 scale. But that question about, am I no longer full, became a challenge because I took 2 bites and then in all honesty had to sit there and say, I'm no longer hungry. And by the rules, that was when I needed to stop. And I just remember just staring at this thing I had waited for all night and just wanting to cry. I mean, that may sound crazy, but I mean, I think that's a really great example of the emotional connection we have to food. So many times it's not about whether we're hungry. It's about we're eating to change our mood, to feel better, to deal with a feeling that we're not used to or that we're not comfortable with, or we just tune out. We eat because of habit, because it tastes good, for any number of reasons that really aren't connected to our physical experience of hunger. And I think that becomes really important around the holidays, because all too often you're going to these office parties with a lot of savory food, or you're going to a family's house, or there's expectation, or your mother makes a certain dish that everyone eats and everyone's just going to be so upset if you don't eat that. It has nothing to do with whether you want it, whether or not you like it, whether or not it would even taste good when you eat it. It's just expectation. And I think the holidays are the worst time of year for that. It really, even if you're, very conscientious the rest of the year, I think the holidays, being around family, being around, loaded emotions, because not all family get-togethers are roses and sunshine. It's very challenging for a lot of people. There's a definite increase in depression and anxiety around the holidays, a definite increase in stress, and those are all conditions that set someone up to really automatically go to comfort foods, feeling like I need this to get through, or I need this, or this is what I always do. And I think it takes a great deal to really challenge that and be conscious about that. I don't think that we're taught to be conscious around food and our choices around food.
Point, because that really gives a whole new meaning to mindfulness with eating, to really figure it out.
Exactly.
And say, am I eating this because my aunt wants me to eat it and she'll get her feelings hurt if I don't eat it, or there's other reasons going on, or it's just something that my go-to food, my comfort food when I was growing up, and this is my ice cream sundae or anything like that. So there's a lot of things that go beyond just cravings, I think, when we look at this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I would challenge many people. I know that people really struggle with cravings, and I would challenge people to really, once again, step back and really sit with that feeling, even if it's uncomfortable, and really think, is this a physical craving? Because if it's a physical craving, you may, people don't know this, but sometimes when you're craving chocolate, I mean, truly a physical craving. I actually had somebody describe this recently, and I thought this was great. They said, if in their experience, if you're craving a certain food, like lasagna with a certain amount of cheese and this and that, if you're craving a certain food, it's more often psychological or emotional. If you're craving a class of food, like something sweet or something sour, that's more often indicative of a physical craving and maybe an electrolyte imbalance. So even if it's like chocolate, there's a great deal of magnesium and antioxidants in chocolate. So you can actually be craving chocolate when you're actually deficient in magnesium. And it doesn't mean that, you are out of control, or, that you can't handle yourself. But sometimes people can't tell the difference if they're not particularly conscious about how and when and why they eat.
That I would be guilty of that chocolate craving as well. So maybe I do need to check my magnesium.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the best ways in general to deal with some of these issues, and certainly to deal with cravings, I think the best way is to really make sure that you're eating well, that you're eating good food that has a good amount of nutrients in it, and even taking targeted supplements. I mean, most people, even if they eat quote unquote a perfect diet, are deficient in things like magnesium, oftentimes potassium, vitamin D. This is a time of year where we're spending less time outdoors, and we can start having some imbalances. People, particularly people who live in like the Northeast or areas where it's not as sunny, which wouldn't really apply to you and I so much. But there's a real vitamin D deficiency. So one of the ways to deal with this is to really, pay attention to your nutrition and your supplementation, to be eating regularly, to make sure that you're staying hydrated. People don't know, but they do get dehydrated in cold weather. It's not just in hot weather. And all of those things are kind of like a foundation to kind of pay attention to before you just assume that you're out of control and, just give it up until February when the holidays are over.
Patients that we test for vitamin D deficiency, even in Florida, are very deficient. So it's the UV coating on the windows and the cars, and slathering on the sunscreen, and just really avoiding the UV light. which is beneficial in so many ways for our skin, but also our body suffers. I mean, we have to supplement with vitamin D3, and for PCOS, it's so crucial. It has so much benefit. I guess we're getting a little bit off subject, but I just thought, you know what, I wanted to bring up the emotional eating aspect of this, because we're going to go through some diets that would be, I guess I don't even want to say diets, but basically like some, plans that might be good for PCOS and beneficial. And we all know that low carb is usually our mantra, but I just wanted to get your opinion on a few kind of more popular diets out there, like the ketogenic plan, and just what your thoughts are on that before we kind of recap about emotional eating and that sort of thing.
Well, when it comes to diets in general, I'll tell you that I find that most people don't really they don't know a lot about nutrition, and through no fault of their own, there's a lot of misleading advertising, but they also don't know about diets. Most people, what they know about nutrition and diet is through a lens of weight loss, and so they're often following a diet that their sister followed, or a good friend, or they read a book, or saw it on a magazine. That's where most people get the idea of what diet they should follow. It's not based on their health. And I have to, I'm not anti-doctor, believe me. I don't mean to bash doctors, but doctors are not trained in nutrition. So going to your doctor and asking about nutrition in most cases is not going to be very helpful, because they don't know about it. They haven't trained in it. Many of them don't even believe that nutrition plays a role in health. So it's not really a good source. So first you have to look at where people are even getting the idea of what diet they should follow. That's number one. Number two, there's always a fad diet going on. For a long time, it was always low fat. Now it's switched to low carb. And in the name of that, there's things like ketogenic is a particularly low carb, high fat diet. Atkins, the Zone, Weight Watchers. I mean, we all know there's a million diets out there. The fact is that there isn't one that's going to be the right one for everyone. I've been doing a lot of reading about the ketogenic diet lately, because it's highly promoted in terms of cancer, and it would also probably be highly promoted in terms of some of the I don't know with PCOS, but at least it's low carb, so I don't know if you recommend it for your patients.
You do start with it. It's not, I don't feel, some people can do it long term, but it's tough. It's a tough one to do long term, I think. So the goal is weight loss.
Well, see, that's the problem. It's a tough one to do short term. The whole thing about a ketogenic diet, and I'm actually on a group right now, and it's amazing to me to read what people are saying in this group. A ketogenic diet means, it's all about being very low carbohydrate and high in fat. And people think it's high in protein. It's not. It's meant to be high in fat. The ketogenic diet actually has been used extensively in terms of treating children with epilepsy, because the process of making ketones in your body seems to cross the blood-brain barrier, and it's good for your brain. But that's actually the medical and therapeutic foundation of a ketogenic diet. It's caught on, and it's really popular right now in fitness, and people who are into particularly men who are into weightlifting. It's a very popular diet. But like with anything, that there's a time and place for that. It's not the best for everyone. And my biggest problem with the ketogenic diet is it's really difficult to follow. So if you're not following a ketogenic diet, which means that you've got you're testing every day to see if you have ketones in your urine, and if you're not in ketosis, which is what you're trying to do, you're trying to switch your body into a mode of burning fat as opposed to burning sugar in your body for energy that releases ketones. Unless you are in ketosis and doing that, you are essentially, you could be working against your best interest, because then you're eating high fat and high carbohydrate. If you're not in ketosis, you're not going to get the benefit of a high fat diet meant to put you in ketosis. And it's just a very specific diet. It's not one that you just jump into. I think most people need to study and really learn about it. And yet it's so popular that I tell you, I get people 5-10 times a week saying, "Oh, I'm going to go on a ketogenic diet." It's like, do you know anything about it? The fact is it's probably one of the most restrictive and difficult diets there is to follow, although it's popular. I think for many people, certainly our clients, you can get very much the same benefit that you're looking to get from a ketogenic diet, which is improved blood sugar control, improved insulin response and sensitivity, and losing weight in inches by eating a low carbohydrate diet. So, which is still something that you need to learn about and something that you need to be very conscious of. But following a low carbohydrate, whole food based diet is something that most people can reach a lot easier than putting yourself in a state of ketosis. So there's always a fad diet. Right now, the popular diet is the ketogenic diet. But even bigger than that, I'm trying to keep this succinct, but even bigger than that, the fact is that every diet you go on is going to work to a certain degree, and they're all going to fail to a certain degree because it's a diet. And you go on and off diets, and so you may lose weight, but you very likely may gain it back. And my concern is that if you just pick a diet to go on and you're not looking at these emotional factors that go into why you're eating what you're eating and what happens when you're out of control, it doesn't matter what diet you go on. They're all going to fail. The more conscious you can be, the more aware you can be of your own habits, the more you can, kind of release and walk away from things and instead of feeling like you have to give it up, the more likely you are to make it a permanent change that you can be successful with over time. And once again, coming back to the emotional eating, I have to tell you, I'm particularly interested in working with people who have had weight loss surgery, which is considered the magic bullet and the holy grail of weight loss. Even then, and especially then, that is a physical change to deal with a problem that is emotionally based. Because eating food to the point that you carry enough weight that you need to have surgery to restrict your physical ability to eat is, to me, is the classic definition of having an emotional eating dysfunctional relationship with food. And I was one of those people. I went through gastric surgery. I lost weight and, still struggle with, still have to do the same things I would have to do even if I hadn't had the gastric surgery, but I still struggle with weight. It's not about the diet. It's about understanding your relationship to the food. And so I think with any of these, I work with people around a whole cognitive based issue about looking at food, the relationship with food, and as you talked about at the very beginning, I find this comes up when I ask people to just write down what they've been eating. Every new client that I see, I have a bunch of intake paperwork that I send them, and I also send them a form that's a 3-day food log. Just tell me what you ate. If it's best for me to know what you eat before you come in to see me. And almost to a person, that form is never filled out. It doesn't matter what they're coming in for. And it's not anything critical. I don't have any judgment in it. It's just sort of an FYI. And yet it's the hardest thing to get people to do is to fill that out, because immediately they have feelings of shame, guilt, oh, well, I ate it, but I'm not going to write it down. Or, it's just, to me, that's just an indication that you come into my office and you have a perfect body, but if you can't be conscious enough to write down what you ate without guilt or shame, there's a deeper issue there than what diet you're following. It's once again looking at that emotional connection and the emotional relationship with food. And I don't think that you get a free pass on that if you're a thin person, and it only applies if you're a heavier person. I think it applies to everyone.
That's just, I couldn't have said it better. And I think that, especially when we're coming up on the holidays, like we talked about before, and even if it's a birthday party, if it's so many things can derail you. We actually do a lot of genetic testing with our patients with PCOS, and 9 times out of 10, the genetic testing will say that genetically you're actually meant to have a low carb diet. So we just got that result so many times that we actually just stopped testing because we said, you know what, it's going to come back low carb and these are the recommendations. But having someone that you go to and that you're accountable to, I think that that's so important. And that's what I love about what you do, is that you're helping women be accountable. And so many times it's just so many roadblocks and things that even our family and our friends are not helpful when we're struggling to lose that weight. So I think
well, it comes back to the shame and sometimes it's your family that's putting you in, kind of an emotional place that you react. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. I know when I'm around, I don't, I've got some pretty crazy dynamics, but when I'm around my sister and I see what kind of stuff she eats, I mean, and it goes back to comfort food and things that are familiar. Oh my God, it's a huge trigger in and of itself. Family is not, and not to mention it's one of those things that I don't really know if I have an explanation for it, but sometimes family isn't it's like on one hand, they want you to, they're critical of you, but then when you start having success, they're not particularly supportive or helpful. It can be a very mixed bag. It was sort of like when I had a gastric band, and afterwards, believe me, I put up with a lot of, discrimination around my weight a lot. And yet when I was losing weight, people would be like, oh, but that's such a cop out. I can't believe you're doing it that way. It was like, what difference does it make to you how I'm losing weight? What possible difference could it make? But people get really weird, and they get really weird around food. And particularly if it's the holidays and you're not eating the Jell-O mold that was made just for the holidays, and you just say, no, thank you, that's not good enough. I think Weight Watchers calls them food pushers. It's like, here, a little bit more, have a bite of this, you're too skinny. You could be 50 pounds overweight, but if you're 10 pounds less than you were, they're telling you you're too skinny. It's a really mixed bag. It's really tough.
How do we deal with the pressure and that sort of thing during the holidays, and also just around family? What advice would you give?
Well, it's really funny. I just have been working on a guide. It's called the Holiday Survival Guide, and I'm going to actually be putting it on my website in a few days to kind of help people with this. And I think a lot of it is just some of the things that we've talked about. For one thing, acknowledge if you're going into an emotionally loaded situation. If you can't stand your mother-in-law and, Christmas dinner's at her house, that's going to be an emotionally loaded situation. So, there are things to do, like for one thing, acknowledge that it's going to be difficult, particularly with politics these days, try to get out of any political conversations. If you're going with friends or family, pick an ally and somebody that you can talk to and say, wow, if you see this, help me out here and, pull me away from the cheesecake or whatever it is. So I think going in with some strategies is kind of the most straightforward thing to do. Understand that, there's going to be office parties and stuff that are tempting. One of the things that I do is when you go to a buffet, the first thing I do is look around and decide the top 3 things that I want to have, because it's really easy to just take everything because it's there. But, try to be conscious and really make the choices of what's going to feel good, and, get smaller servings on smaller plates and go back for seconds if you need to. But, just some really conscious behavioral kind of things. The other thing that I think is really important is realize you're not going to be perfect. You're going to have cake. You're going to have candy. You're going to have things that maybe you shouldn't have. I once heard somebody talk about it. She's like, it's sort of like falling downstairs. Like if you trip down the stairs in the morning, it's not like, oh, I fell today, so I'm going to fall every day this week, every time I go down the stairs. But that's how people approach food. Oh, well, I cheated this morning, so, my diet's blown. Doesn't matter what I eat for the rest of the day. If you have something, or, if you eat something that, that isn't what you wanted, or, or you did want it and it's not in your eating plan, just accept the fact that you did it. And, in your next meal, get back to eating the way that you want to. I mean, even if it's a holiday party, that's only one party. That's only one food experience. It doesn't mean you have to eat the same way at breakfast the next day, or lunch. So, it's a time where there's more food than we could ever imagine. So just allow the fact that there's going to be times that you can sit there and say, yeah, I know I shouldn't have it, but I really want it. Well, if that's the case, then have it. Have a portion of it. Enjoy every bite of it. If it's, I don't know, if it's cheesecake or chocolate, enjoy every bite and then put it away and get back on track on your next meal. It's just one experience. But people have this mentality of like, oh my God, I'm off my diet now, so it doesn't matter, and I'm just going to eat everything until New Year's. And that's when you get into the fact that you've gained 10 pounds. You don't feel good about yourself. Your energy's bad, and I mean, I think those are the things that are really important is how do you feel? Does it give you indigestion? Do you feel bloated and lethargic? And, a lot of times the food that we're eating, we're not even paying attention to how it makes us feel. But even if you, do have something that, wouldn't be considered to be on your diet, just have it and enjoy it and get over it. And don't beat yourself up about it. I know that's easier said than done, but people do a lot of head trips on themselves around food.
Just don't beat yourself up over
right
some pecan pie
and make it a slice of pecan pie. I heard somebody at a nutrition conference a few years ago said that when you eat chocolate, and once again going back to that mindfulness, but you can be craving a piece of chocolate cake, but your taste buds after about the third bite actually get desensitized to it. So it's actually that first 3 bites that taste outstanding. And after that, if you really pay attention and check in, am I still enjoying this? Is this still a 10 on a 1 to 10 scale? And you're halfway through the cake and the answer is no. Then it's okay, wait until you haven't had it for a while and then have another 1 to 3 bites and really enjoy it. But just make sure you're enjoying it, and not beating yourself up. Or what seems to be really common is to be at the party or the dinner and, be restricting yourself, feel like, okay, I made it through that, and then go home and then binge, once you get home and there's no one around to see you. That seems to be a pretty common pattern too. And so, once again, if that's what's happening, just try to be mindful of it. And I know it's a horrible thing to say, but keeping a journal, writing down oh my God, I was full halfway through the time, and I still kept eating. Good to know. Next time, maybe you'll be a little bit more aware of that and you'll stop eating before you've eaten everything. Once you're already full. It's just, we just live in such a cycle of guilt and shame and condemning ourselves that the more we can be conscious and get out of that critical space, I think the better you can be about making choices that support where you want to be.
Jewels and knowledge. It's been wonderful. And it seems like time has just flown by, but we're already at the end. So I would love to help people get in touch with you. So how could they find you?
Oh, great. Thanks for asking. My website is mindbodynutritionrn.com. And I always love getting emails, and I respond to all emails, and I can be reached at radicalhealthrn@gmail.com. And, this is something that I've, passionate about and something that I work with people about. And, if any of your listeners, want to send a question or a comment or whatever, I'd love to hear from them.
I am so thankful for you being on my 3rd episode, and I can't wait to, Deborah is coming out with a podcast herself. So for anyone of you that have members in your, or friends or family members with breast cancer, or who have gone through the diagnosis and are recovering, Deborah will be having her own show soon. And I just can't wait to hear that, because she's just so full of knowledge. Every time we talk, I learn something new every time. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Have a great night and enjoy your cake, but don't enjoy it too much, right? Yes, the first 3 bites.
Your first 3 bites.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the PCOS Revolution podcast. Be sure to visit us on Facebook and Instagram to join in the conversation, access the show notes, and discover our fantastic bonus content. If you love the PCOS Revolution, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review on iTunes. Until next time, beautiful ladies.